Hello. Testing, testing. One, two, three. मार्क के भी दे देना. आप भूलिए ना. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وصلوا على محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So today, the topic that I will be sharing with you guys is tools of knowledge and worldview. So we're going to use this to reassess our outlook on life. All right. So the purpose of this topic, one, the intrinsic nature of us humans is to know, right? And we all have important questions in life and we all seek answers. Whether it's about religion, whether it's about the world, how we perceive the universe, we all have questions. And we all have a certain set of beliefs and want to make sure that they are correct and in line with reality. Just a moment. The second purpose, all right, so, but knowing is not just for the sake of knowing. We want to learn how and where to get reliable answers. And because this has an impact on our values and our lifestyle, right? Pretty much. But that's backed by your worldview. How you critically think, how you question the world. That's, yes, yes. So a person that has, we'll get into this later. I'll talk about that. It's a good point. So the initial topic will not give you the answers directly, but it will show you what needs to take place so that you ask the right questions and get the right answers. So it's really about how we shape our questions uh, to answer reality. So again, the answers to our questions, which lead to the acceptance of certain beliefs, forms what is called our worldview. All right. So I'm gonna write this down. What is worldview? So it is what we accept exists and does not exist. In other words, it's a collection of our beliefs, and these in turn affect our values and actions. So our worldview is determined by the tools of knowledge that we adopt. I'm gonna make this, what's it called? I'm gonna make a little visual. So TOK, these affect our beliefs, and in turn, these affect our worldview. All right. Assalamu alaikum. How are you? All right. So we're going to define worldview to the side right here. All right. So again, I'll just reiterate the worldview. It is what we accept exists and doesn't exist. In other words, it's the collection of our beliefs. All right. So these shape our worldview, and these in turn will affect our values and actions. So how does a worldview form? So first of all, information is given to us, right, to our minds, and it can be done either actively learning or subconsciously, right? So your environment affects what information is fed into you. The media you consume affects what information is into you. And we accept and adopt some of it either actively or subconsciously. So this information then becomes the set of beliefs and values, right, that drive our decisions and actions. And where and how we get the information that forms the basis of our worldview, that's the question we're going to see. So where do we begin? First of all, we need to know our tools, right? What tools of knowledge do we have to create a proper worldview? And how do we pick the right tool? How do we need to know the domain and limitations of each tool? And how do we use it in the right way? What happens if I don't know the tools available to me, or if I use the wrong tool, or I use the right tool incorrectly? So that affects our worldview. So let's get into the tools of knowledge. Assalamu alaikum. So we're gonna go over the 3 tools of knowledge, alright? The first tool is the 5 senses. Alright. So there's the domain of this, right, is physical and material entities. Right? So it's really what you see, what you hear, what you taste, what you can touch, right? However, it has limitations. Alright. So anything beyond the physical material world, it can answer for us. It's really just limited to what you see, what you hear. You can't answer questions outside of this. Each sense is limited to a specific type of stimulus. So again, your taste, your tongue is only, it's for taste. Your eyes are only for looking. Assalamu alaikum. So note, the 5 senses cannot give any type of verdict on a matter that is beyond their domain. So we're gonna get into this. So, does this iPhone exist? Yes, it does. All right. Now, do angels exist? How do you know? Using just your 5 senses, how do you know? No, right? Very good. Okay, so that shows you the limitation of your 5 senses, right? They can only teach us, they can only tell us what we can physically perceive, materialistic. We're getting into that. Don't worry. All right. Now, when science says God doesn't exist, right? That's a wrong, false statement, right? What the real answer of what they're trying to say is that we don't have proof to prove that God exists. We don't know. No, yeah. So that's the assumption they make, right? They assume. Same thing with evolution and other factors, right? Science, in general, can't when it can't conclude about something beyond the 5 senses, beyond the physical world, it says it either doesn't exist or adds its own theories on it, right? Again, we're not negating science here. We're just saying modern science, right? The main conclusions they derive. For example, a big statement like God doesn't exist, right? They are just saying that because they have a limitation of the 5 senses. In reality, their conclusion is we don't know if God exists. Physically, we cannot prove that God exists because we don't see him. We don't, we can't touch him. So just keep that in mind as we go through the second tool of knowledge. Are we clear? Any questions so far? All right, cool. The next tool of knowledge, which is a little above the 5 senses, is called the aql. All right? This is the intellect. Assalamu alaikum, how are you? All right. This is the second tool of knowledge, aql. All right. So its domain, it has an independent function, which is understanding in universal realities, even if it's not material. Right? Your aql is how you process everything, how you process the material world. It's beyond that, right? For example, you can think of things that don't exist physically, right? You can think of a fire-breathing dragon that doesn't physically exist, or anything, right? It has a lot of uses. So, yeah, understanding realities. All right. So every effect has a cause. This is an example. Every effect has a cause. A whole is always bigger than its own parts, materialistically, and opposites can never be together at the same time, at the same place, from the same perspective. All right, that's just an example. Now, the dependent function of the aql is processing the information. Okay, so it's proving the input and the output can be particular, but the process connecting them is aqli, it's universal. So again, the aql also has limitations. Just like the five senses have limitations, aql is also limited. It cannot independently understand particular concepts, and it can correctly process wrong information, right? And it can wrongly process correct information. So you see, it's a slippery slope. It can either be used for a correct conclusion or for a false conclusion. And just because something seems to make sense doesn't mean it's necessarily logically sound, right? That's why even what's it called? That's why in the Hausa, they study logic, they study philosophy before they derive laws, before they study Islam further, because you use those sciences to correctly reach a logical conclusion. So again, the aql is a slippery slope, but it is very, very useful for beyond the five senses. That's how we process the world. It's how we understand reality, right? And it's how you advance further as a human. The third of tool of knowledge, this is the last one. So what are the two ones that we talked about so far? One of you go ahead. Jamal?
Um, Akal and near five senses.
Very good. The last one is wahi. Does anyone know what this means? It means divine revelation. Right. This is the third tool of knowledge. So definition, knowledge given by the all-knowing God directly to the prophets, right? It is what is divinely sent down to the material world. Its domain is everything. Wahi answers everything. It tells you how to sleep, it tells you how to pray, it tells you how to act, it tells you how not to act, right? It tells you how to run the social, economic world. It tells you how to form a government. It shows you who to follow, right? It shows you every aspect of your life Islamically, how you sleep, how you eat, how you walk, how you work, right? It gives you a moral code. However, it has limitations. In order for Wahi to be used as a tool of knowledge, existence has to be proven. And that has to be done through the aql. Alright. So some things to keep in mind. I don't have access directly, so I need to understand it correctly. It can tell us everything, but does it have to? Sometimes it's Allah's wisdom not to, right? About certain things. We may not understand certain things. People didn't ask the imams. It's for our intellectual growth, right? And it's also a test, and we don't need to know. It could be a distraction. So these are all things, right? That that what that didn't necessarily tell us, but this is why it may like this is why some things we don't know, right? For example, why do we have to pray this many number of rakahs, right? It won't tell you that. That's something that is irrelevant. But it will tell you the main things that you need to know. So now that we do know, so first of all, let me put these in perspective, right? The five senses, right? These are for specifically the material world. All right. Beyond this, you're gonna need your aql, right? To process the material world, right? To think further, to critically think about the material world. And to confirm the aql, you're gonna need wahi. This is the ultimate guide, right? So in Islam, we believe in the five senses as well as our aql, as well as wahi, right? These all build upon each other. Now, someone with a materialistic worldview would solely rely on the five senses, right? However, someone who has an Islamic worldview would rely on all three. Someone with just an aqli worldview would rely on the five senses as well as the aql. So it builds on each other. Now, aql can lead to two directions. It either leads you back to a materialistic worldview, or it can lead you back to a godly worldview, and that's what we're going to get into. But first, let's do some examples. So, what is the color of this marker?
Black.
Black. Okay. Can the five senses answer this? Right? You can see it, right? And it is a particular attribute. All right. Can the intellect answer this? It can't. The intellect can only understand universal concepts and process information, right? There's nothing beyond this that you need to understand, right? You can just simply perceive this from your five senses. You don't have to think about it. Is it really black, right? Is this perceived? Can revelation answer this? Yes. The revelation can answer this, but its domain is unlimited, right? Remember that. God's knowledge is unlimited. Wahi is really just God's knowledge. Just because Allah didn't tell me that this marker is black doesn't mean I don't know it's black, right?
Revelation, you mean like that God will release,
Will tell you, like through a prophet or an imam, right? Like you don't need that, right? You can just simply answer this with just your five senses. You don't even need your aql, your intellect, right? Exactly. Even an animal can tell you, you know. So now let's expand our questions. Do angels exist? Can our five senses tell us that? No, right? Why? Very good. So it cannot answer it. It can't give a verdict about anything beyond the physical world, right? When we're talking about angels, they're beyond the material world. Now the intellect. Can the intellect answer if there's angels? What do you think?
Yeah. Actually, yeah.
It can give you a general answer, right? For example, he admits God, if he exists, right? If you accept he exists through your intellect, then then you can assume that he administers the universe through intermediaries, right? That's something that can be assumed through the aql. But how do you confirm that your aql is correct? You go to wahi, right? Revelation. So can revelation give you an answer about if angels exist? Yes, right? God does so in the Quran, right? It can revelation in this matter can give a very specific answer. For example, the ranks of the angels, their names and their duties, right? So if you just think about this, like these different questions we ask, they require different tools of knowledge, right? For example, if you want to question your physical world, you don't need to go beyond your five senses. You can just use the five senses. You wouldn't use wahi for that. However, when it comes to supernatural questions such as angels, you'll need something better than the five senses, like your aql. You'll need something even better like the wahi, right? So it's really about what tools you use for what question. All right, next question. Is it good or bad to drink alcohol and eat pork? Can your five senses tell you this?
No.
No, right? It, all right, it's fine. That's good. But think about it critically, right? Is it good to or bad to drink alcohol and eat pork? You know, people eat pork, right, as if it's something normal, right? For your health, it's bad, but people don't care. It isn't that damaging. Exactly. There's other things as well, right? Even lawful things, right? Like water. If you drink too much water, it's harmful. So objectively, it can tell you that. The five senses don't understand right and wrong. We have to keep that in mind. Right and wrong is very subjective. It's aqli, right? What you may think is wrong in another person's mind, and what you think is wrong is right in another person's mind. We see this today. So the aql, the intellect, cannot answer independently, but based on the information given by the senses, it can give us an answer based on the physical dimension, right? So again, how do we know that pork is bad? Specifically, just from a materialistic view, when you think about it, right, you're like, these are the bad effects of pork, right? These are the bad effects of alcohol. Therefore, I will assume that it's bad for me, right? However, someone else may assume something else based on that information. Based on how they process the material world, they'll lead to different conclusions. Now, how do we know that we have the correct view? Is it really good or bad to drink alcohol and eat pork? Will Wahi answer this for us? Yes, right? It can answer in more depth, taking account the spiritual dimension as well, right? So when you eat something haram, right, not only does it have a bad physical effect, it has a bad spiritual effect. It distances you from God, right? But you can only know that through wahi. If your intellect accepts there is God, then you accept everything He sent down, everything He revealed, right? So therefore, you'll accept that pork and alcohol is bad for you. So you see how like each tool of knowledge can lead to different conclusions. It's really about which one you use for what question, the correct one that you want to use. I'll do one more example. What is the cure for depression? Can your five senses answer this? No, because it doesn't grasp the reason behind anything, right? So the intellect, can it answer it? Independently, it can't answer it. But based on the information given by the five senses, it can give us an answer based on the physical dimension.
So it can't answer by itself.
It needs the five senses. Ahsan. The aql needs the five senses to reach the conclusion, to reach the answer to this question. Again, what is the cure for depression? Can Revelation answer this? Yes. Revelation can answer everything, basically. But it's really about if it needs to answer it, right? So Revelation can answer in more depth, taking account the spiritual dimension as well.
Another question.
Yeah.
So when you said you know that if you have faith in your revelation with God, how do you know that's
How God exists?
like how what the God's revelation is like good, like it's good for you.
That's a separate topic. That goes into Tawheed. But very good. So this goes back to the aql, right? Your five senses perceive something, but it's limited. Then you use your aql. Does God exist, right? You either reach the conclusion that He doesn't or He does. If He does, you have to accept some facts about that, right? If God exists and there's a bunch of universal truths, you have to accept with that. For example, God is truth, right? That is established, right? When you go into Tawheed. Again, that's a separate discussion, but a very good question. Or I'll do one last one, just to get us thinking. Do we have a purpose in life? Can our five senses tell us this? No, right off the bat, right? It can answer. The five senses tell us about the physical properties of things, but it doesn't tell us why. That's beyond that. That's beyond its domain. So then you go to the next one, aql. Can the intellect give you an answer about your purpose in life? Yes. It can answer generally. The answer would be based first on logically proving the existence of God and His wisdom in creating. So again, your aql will this time lead you to wahi. And then revelation. Can it answer this? Yes. So it can answer in detail, can even tell you what the purpose is, right, in the Quran through revelation. Alright, so summary so far. We naturally want to know the truth because it has an impact on our beliefs and values, and hence our lifestyle, right? These all build upon each other. And we will only know the truth if we ensure we use the correct tools of knowledge, right? If I use the aql, right? If I strictly use the five senses, I cannot prove that there is God. But if I use my aql, there is a possibility I reach God, right? So since each tool has a specific domain as well as certain limitations. Again, the three tools are five senses, intellect, and revelation. Now we're gonna get into worldviews. Alright. So again, the tools of knowledge, they build upon each other and they shape our worldview. Again, this isn't to answer a specific question. This topic is to get you thinking, to ask the right questions, to seek the right answers. So let's go into a materialistic worldview. All right. The basis of a materialistic worldview, right, is that it's achieved only through the five senses. Right? We can agree with this, right? A materialistic worldview is purely based on the five senses, pleasuring them, fulfilling the five senses. And it's the only independent and primary tool for acquiring knowledge, right? Look at science today. How do you reach conclusions about the universe, about the world? Theories, right? But those theories are formed by what? Physically, what you perceive, right? The physical world. Yeah, so this worldview is completely dependent on what you perceive. A scientific, what's it called, law, right, is derived from what you observe, right? Observations, the scientific method, right? The data you gather, right, that's from the five senses. The intellect is only used at the service of the five senses. So how you process that, how you reach a theory, right, is based on the five senses, the aql, right? So what's the result of a materialistic worldview? Therefore, any premise that is purely intellectual but cannot be proven by the five senses is rejected, right? So does God exist? Intellectually, right? If you think about it, maybe you'll reach the conclusion that he does, right? But with a materialistic worldview, unless there's any proof through the five senses, they'll reject that God exists, right? It only accepts the physical dimension of the world. So therefore, it will deny God. It will deny angels. It will deny the prophets. It will deny that death is the end, right? It isn't the end. Sorry. It'll just whatever it can see, that's it. There's nothing beyond that, right? It'll reject everything else. So what are the consequences of a materialistic worldview? So responsibility and accountability are limited to physical benefits and harms. Again, subjective morals, right? Pleasure, pain, order. All of these are subjective and very materialistic. Something that was bad back then by materialists, it can be good today, right? And vice versa, right? You know, you've ever heard like, what's it called? Yes, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone, right? As long as, just be a good person. Now you question that ideology. What is a good person? What is right and wrong? What's your basis for that? Is it what you think? Because it's not what everyone else thinks. It's very subjective. So, someone with a materialistic worldview, right, cannot govern the world. It cannot govern society, right? It will just lead to its own destruction. And again, there's no direction in life. It says above physical and social inclinations, right? Someone with a materialistic worldview, their only purpose is to fulfill their five senses. That's it. Nothing beyond that. There's no bigger goal. In the end, they'll chase money, right? They'll chase wealth. They'll chase other things in life. In the end, there isn't a bigger goal. It's just fulfilling yourself. There's nothing beyond that. All right, let's go into an intellectual worldview, right? So this one will use the five senses and the aql. All right, this is an aqli worldview. Keep in mind the thing I said, the aql is a bridge between the wahi and the five senses. It'll either lead you back to a materialistic worldview or it'll lead you to an Islamic worldview. So the basis of an intellectual worldview, it is the worldview achieved by using the five senses as well as the intellect as independent tools for acquiring knowledge. Okay? So again, it uses this as well as this. The result, therefore, premises that are purely intellectual cannot be proven by the five senses are also accepted, right? Someone with an aqli worldview, if they logically reach a conclusion, they don't need the five senses to prove it, right? They can just accept it. That's contrary to what we said about the materialistic ones, right? An intellectual worldview at least thinks beyond the material world. It accesses realities through intellectual and logical arguments, right? Does God exist? It's a whole logical argument, right? The five senses can't answer that for you. You have to think about it logically and reach conclusion. However, the details to many questions remain unanswered, right? Okay, I accept that God exists, right? But what does God say, right? What do I have to do now that I know that God exists? Where do I go from here, right? Your aql can't answer that. You have to go to wahi for that, right? Your wahi will answer that. So it's a very general understanding of things, right? It's very general to accept what justice is and what oppression is, right? That's a very general understanding. It isn't backed by anything. It's just backed by what you can understand. So what are the consequences of a purely intellectual worldview? The consequences is that responsibility and accountability is extended to non-physical realm in a general sense, and direction in life is still not very clear. So again, you have a general understanding of the world around you, but you don't know where to go from there. So the basis, now the last worldview we're going to get into, and we're almost near the end, a religious worldview, which uses wahi, right? So again, a religious worldview encompasses this, and this. Its basis is a worldview achieved by using the five senses, right? So think about it, the Islamic golden age, right? If religion was really against science, would Muslims have progressed this much in science? No, right? We created algebra, right? We created a lot of the algorithms that run our phones today, right? That why? Because religion doesn't reject science, right? A religious worldview accepts this under the basis of this, right? You look at science through a godly perspective. It uses the five senses, it uses intellect, and it uses revelation. And how is revelation proven? Through your aql, right? Your intellect proves wahi as independent tools for acquiring knowledge. So when you acquire knowledge from a religious worldview, you'll consider all of these. So what's the result of a religious worldview? Realities beyond the intellect are also accepted. So for example, we've never seen angels. I'm assuming none of us have seen an angel before, right? However, our intellect, right, accepts wahi, and therefore angels exist, right? We accept God exists, we accept the Quran, therefore angels exist. We don't need anything further. The details to many questions are answered, right? Who leads us? The prophets, right? Which prophet? The last one, right? Precise understandings of practical matters can also be obtained, right? Belief in God, prophets, the fact that there is even a soul that exists within us, right? The hereafter, details of how to live life in the material world, practical guidelines, and a strong standard for morality. Good and bad is clearly differentiable. With wahi, right? With intellect and the five senses, good and bad is very subjective, right? Again, but when you go to wahi for morality, for good and bad, is it objective? Is it objective? Yes, right? It clearly tells you what is good, what is bad. So that's the good thing about a religious worldview, right? You don't need to go beyond, you don't need to, what's it called, remain lost. You have a clear answer before you. So what are the consequences of a religious worldview? Responsibility and accountability extended to non-physical realm in specific terms. Direction in life becomes very clear, as well as the steps to achieve one's goal, right? What is our goal as humans? Is to reach perfection, to reach God, right? To reach our full potential, right? How do we do that? By obeying God, obeying His laws, right? Obeying His commandments, right? And that becomes very clear. Why? Why is that clear for us? How do we know what we need to achieve in life? It's because we accepted wahi through our logic, right? We don't have a materialistic worldview, or that's what we want to avoid at least, right? We don't want to stick to just fulfilling our five senses, right? We have a purpose greater than that. The humans were given intellect for that reason by God, right? But we were also given desires. When we balance that, we reach wahi, we reach revelation. When we suppress our own desires and we go for wahi based on our aql, right? We reach perfection, we reach our ultimate goal. And that is what we all want to achieve, right?
I had a question.
Go ahead.
Can you have one and not the other two?
With an Islamic worldview?
Just in general. Like, can you have aql but not have the senses and wahi?
No. So the aql is necessary, right? The wahi you can live without wahi. I mean, unless like look at everyone else outside the world, right? They're living without revelation, right? Their pure basis is just the five senses, just fulfilling them. And then however they process that, right? That leads to their conclusions. It's about morality or anything. Are they right necessarily? Some of them could be. I think we can agree with everyone outside that murder is bad, right? Now, is homosexuality right? That's a subjective question. Outside, they'll say yes, right? Over here, we'll say no. So again,
But even not all believe that because of Christianity.
exactly. Why? Because they accept revelation. Again, yeah. But how they process the five senses, right? It's very subjective. So where do we stand? That's the main question we have today, right? Our actions and decisions reflect our beliefs and worldview. If you have a godly worldview, right, you will work for God. You will obey His commandments, right? You will have good akhlaq, right? You will pray 5 times a day. You will read Quran, right? You will show mercy to another person. If you have a materialistic worldview, you'll only think about yourself. It's an individualistic mindset, right? What will fulfill my five senses? What will fulfill my desires? How do I acquire wealth, right? How do I acquire power? How do I acquire what's it called? Success, whatever that means, right? Success is different for us. Success is different for a materialistic person.
What is a person with just five senses and not akal or
It's just a materialistic person, someone who just accepts the five senses.
then with akal and five senses, there's still
That's an intellectual worldview. So if you can think beyond that, that's good, right? If you think beyond that, right, you might reach the correct conclusions, but you might reach the wrong conclusions. It's a very slippery slope. Like I said, akal is like the bridge. It'll either lead you back to fulfilling your five senses, or it can lead you to looking for revelation, right? You'll end up with either. So this helps us assess how strongly we believe in Allah and act according to Islam. If you strongly believe in God, if you truly fear God, right, which inshallah we all become, right, we won't have the capacity to sin. The prophets, the imams, right, why didn't they sin? It's because they had a complete worldview, a godly worldview. They understood God's position and their position. They had the power to sin, they chose not to sin, right? So not having an Islamic worldview may be due to a lack of firm belief or lack of knowledge and understanding of Islam. And again, we said our worldview is shaped by what we consume, right? The media we consume, the society we grow up in, the schools we go to, the people we interact with, right? Someone, Assalamu alaikum, brother. So the people who live in America, right, will have a different worldview from someone who lives in Africa, who will have a different worldview from someone who lives in the Middle East, who will have a different view from someone who lives in the North Pole, right? It's all very different. But in the end, we can all accept that if someone uses the akal correctly, it will lead them to look for wahi. And when they find wahi, they will complete their worldview, right? Some of us are born with that, but we acquire parts of the other worldviews, right? There are materialistic Muslims. They exist, right? There are people who just want to fulfill their five senses but claim that we believe in God, right? That's not, in essence, a Muslim. So the question, do we live according to the materialistic worldview or the Islamic worldview? This is an assessment that is very uncomfortable. Currently, do we all live according to a materialistic worldview or an Islamic worldview?
absolutely.
According to the Islamic world.
Truly, we do.
I mean, we do our best.
We do. Are we truly doing our best?
I would say I'm not, but some people are.
Okay. Some people are very good. So you would say their worldview is Islamic, right? But us, as normal people, as me, right, a normal university student in the US, I will personally say that while I strive for an Islamic worldview, internally I'm very materialistic, right? That's a harsh reality I have to come to terms with, right? Growing up here, right, because again, society affects how you grow up, how your worldview. Growing up in the West, right, I have a very materialistic worldview, and I accept that, right? And I want to change that, right? By changing that, I want to acquire an Islamic worldview where I fear God and God is the center of everything, right? If I suppress my desires, it's for the sake of God. If I act on them, it's because of my materialistic worldview, right? And again, this a lot of us have a mix of a worldview, right? A lot of us, have take some parts from Islam, take some parts from the material world. But in essence, what is a true Muslim? What's the meaning of Islam? Submission, right? So when we suppress our inner desires, our shahwat, right? When we suppress all of that and we submit, right? Submit to the will of God, that is when we truly have an Islamic worldview. So what is our purpose in life? Someone with a materialistic worldview would have these beliefs, all right? Let's see if some of ours match, because some of us may match these, right? Someone with a materialistic worldview will say, human beings are like any other animal, just more developed, right? What's evolution? This, right? The world is it. Death is the end, right? That's someone who materialistically views the world will reach this conclusion that just uses their five senses, right? Death is the end. There's nothing beyond that, right? Why do they say this? Because they can't see beyond that.
Just a quick question. What about someone who has five senses, who has aql, and they're trying to get to wahi, but they don't know how? Like, they know that, there is some kind of supernatural force. They know there's someone that put everything in motion.
So someone who truly does reach that conclusion will keep looking for wahi wherever they can find it, right? They will look into Christianity, they will look into Islam, they will look into Judaism, right? Where they fall after that is very what's it called? I can't answer that for you, right? It's very subjective upon the person. Exactly. Depending on what their akal, like, yes, exactly. Depending on their akal, they'll reach their conclusion, right? And again, God is just, right? He'll look at everyone's situation differently, right? It doesn't mean that only Shia Muslims are going to enter heaven, right? God will look at everyone subjectively, right? How everyone lived their life, right? What conclusion they reached, that is how He will judge them, right? If someone truly accepted that God exists and they find truth in Christianity somehow, right? I doubt that person will go to hell, right? If you think about it, a just God wouldn't act that way, right? All right. The result of a materialistic worldview is entirely focused on the pleasures and profits of this world, right? Purely wealth, power, right? Fame, and little to no importance to God, the hereafter, or following any rules, right? If you look at our societies today, right, rules are going. There's no more rules anymore. Every day, something that was forbidden in the past is being accepted as good. And in the future, you'll see this too. Now, someone with an Islamic worldview, how do they think? So they believe human beings have a soul that will continue living after death. We believe in eternity of our souls, right? We don't believe this world is the end. We believe the material world is just temporary. There's something beyond this, right? Someone with an Islamic worldview will strive for perfection, or in other words, the closeness to Allah, or in other words, eternal success, paradise, right? They will keep on striving for that, right? They won't stop. So what's the result of this worldview? They focus on balancing this world and the hereafter, right? Again, Islam doesn't say abandon the world and go into a cave and seek God, right? That isn't the Islamic worldview. Islam says live amongst society and find God, reach God, right? It acknowledges the importance of the physical world, but it tells you your purpose is greater. The physical world is only a means to reach the greater goal. And it doesn't compromise religion for the sake of worldly pleasure and profit, right? What's it called? If you are a Muslim, right, and you find a way to make money, but it's a haram way, will you go for it? No, right? But again, someone with a materialistic worldview, right? They will, right? That's because we have that within us, right? Religion judges, yeah. Religion is what leads us to what decisions we take. It leads us to our actions. And a Muslim finally remembers Allah, they remember death, and they're careful of their actions and words, right? So with this, same thing with drinking alcohol and pork, right? Materialistically, it's tasty, it's fun. You eat and drink as you will. Enjoy life, you know. Don't drink and drive. Just don't do that. Don't drink too much. You know, it's bad for the liver. But again, the result is you can consume these, enjoy and love it, right? That's the materialistic worldview. Islamically, it's haram, right? It has physical harms. It has spiritual harms. It has intellectual harms. It has social harms. And the result, avoid having it completely. Don't go near alcohol. Have a dislike towards it and actually hate alcohol, right? That should be a purely Islamic worldview. Same thing with what university I should go to, right? Materialistically, you will look for the best teachers, the best facilities, the most recognized degree, more work opportunities, ideally in Europe and North America, right? And the result is the utmost effort to find such a university. Now, someone with an Islamic worldview, they will look for the best teachers as well. They will look for the best facilities. They will go for a recognized degree. And they will also look for more work opportunities. Only if their faith is in compromise. Only if they know they won't fall into sin. Only if there aren't good enough universities here, right? Wherever they are. So you see how the Islamic worldview, it kind of shifts your direction of life, right? When you think materialistically, you don't consider Islam in the equation. When you think Islamically, Islam is the equation. All right. So there's a lot more, but I think this is a good ending point, right? Inshallah, next we'll pick up on this. So inshallah, to end this, we pray that we all acquire a purely Islamic worldview, right? We all pray that we do not fall into the trap of materialism. Especially living in a materialistic society, it's very easy to fall into that trap. Again, all of us are guilty, but all of us should have that goal, right? All of us want to reach an Islamic worldview, right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brother Jafar, Bismillah.
I made sure to keep it so you don't have to do a review.
Okay, so, inshallah, how are you guys doing? Everyone's good?
Good.
Good week?
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. All right, so I think this will probably be the end of this discussion, inshallah. And then, if you guys want, I mean, this topic is very deep. We could do even more sessions on it, or here, wait, let me see here. I'm supposed to use this, right? How do you get this on here? Oh, really? Okay. All right. So you guys tell me, because this is supposed to be for the youth, and it's supposed to be for giving us a chance to explore topics that maybe you guys might not feel comfortable talking about in the mosque, right? In the main programs. Things that you guys have questions about. We want to make sure that this is an open forum and you guys can express yourselves. And we can help you, inshallah, with some of the things. Because I think one thing that's really tough in this world right now is the lack of good mentors, right? The lack of people that can sort of guide you. And in particular, I myself am still learning, but inshallah, if I can serve to help with anybody here, inshallah, please let me know how I can be of assistance. But I think this topic, we'll try to keep it focused. But if you guys have questions, you can interject, ask anything you want, okay? So,
I really like this topic because I used to be confused about what is a kafir,
uh-huh.
like what's kufr, like to what extent, because like how Brother Abdullah talked about, like if you don't pray once, like are you considered a kafir?
Right.
So,
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's a very important topic. And you guys remember so far what our discussion has consisted of? If we can recap for the people who might have missed some portions. So, do you guys remember what we were talking about in terms of the definition of the word kufr?
yes, to hide something and like covering it.
Okay, very good.
And then there were two antonyms of it in the Quran.
Yes. And can you explain that for us? What the antonyms are?
They were iman and the first one was shukr, I think.
Yes,
And then
shukr.
the second one was
Right. So shukr,
is to like show gratitude, to be vibrant.
okay.
So it's the opposite of hiding and covering.
Yes, basically. So hiding and covering is showing ingratitude, right? So shukr is to declare and to make it obvious that someone has been gracious to you, right? Whereas kufr is to hide that, right? Kufr consists of being ungrateful, right? So then what about iman? What's the difference there? Iman versus kufr. Remember we said about where does the word iman come from? It comes from the word amn, right? Amn or aman, right? This is the root meaning of the word, right? So aman means like safety, right? So iman is kind of derived from this word, right? So iman means to be firm, to be secure, right? To be tranquil. Whereas kufr then is the opposite. Kufr is someone who doesn't really have that tranquility, doesn't really have that stable, grounded worldview, right? Whereas someone who has iman has a worldview that's very grounded, that keeps them safe, they're tranquil, they're secure about themselves, right? So that's why you might see that people who, people who are there's some people who you look at them, they're really, really mu'min people, right? They're people who have a lot of iman, and you see that there's something about their personality that stands out. It's almost like a certain energy or certain power, right? When you're in their presence. I don't know if you guys have ever like visited any of the scholars in any Islamic countries, like if you went to Iraq or you went to Iran, or if you just spent some time amidst a scholar, right? Someone who is learned, you kind of feel this energy, this power, right? And you wonder, okay, what is this, right? But this is the power of Iman, right? Power of Iman is such that it grounds that person and it helps others around them also feel tranquil, right? So a mu'min is someone who makes other people also feel tranquil, also feel secure, right? So this is the meaning, one of the meanings of the word mu'min, right? So, okay, kufr is someone then who you're around them, you always feel insecure, you always feel scared, you always feel like they're about to slight you, they're about to trick you, right? Okay, and then do you guys remember the different types of kufr we talked about?
Yeah, there was there were two things they do kufr with your tongue and your heart.
Right,
The one, there's hypocrisy where you speak with your tongue, but to your heart you're not true to what you speak.
right,
So being a hypocrite.
right,
And then the other one was rejection, where you know the truth, but you don't take it, you don't like take it in your heart, nor do you speak of it.
right,
And then denial was you know the truth, but you don't speak about it. Like
right.
uh,
You know the truth in your
it's kind
heart,
of like
but
rejection.
you don't want to say it, right?
Yeah,
You don't want to admit it, right? So that's the kufr of al-juhud. Al-juhud means in your heart of hearts, you know that something is true, but you're not willing to say it. You're rejecting it with your tongue, right? So, for instance, Fir'aun, he knew that Prophet Musa was bringing the truth with his heart, right? But he didn't want to say it, right? So that's al-juhud, right? And then obstinacy, what was obstinacy?
obstinacy was you speak the truth,
Yeah,
you speak it, and you know in your heart, but deep down you don't follow.
yes, right. You don't put it into
You don't
practice,
put it
right?
into practice.
So remember we said that the word iman, right, has three levels. One was at the level of the heart, right? And then at the level of the tongue, and then at the level of the actions, right? So iman encompasses all three of these things. So if you are rejecting something with your heart or with your tongue or with your actions, right? It's it can be considered a type of kufr, right? A type of covering or hiding the truth, right? Like we said. So remember, then we talked about the difference between three groups, right? That all use this word kafir, right? So you hear the word kafir, right? Um, but there's three big groups that use this word, right? Um, and it's the theologians, the jurists, and the mystics. Do you guys remember what do we say the theologians? What do they specialize in? What do theologians talk about, or what's their what's their subject of expertise? Aqaid. What do you mean by aqaid? Usuluddin. Can you be more specific? Okay, exactly. So Tawheed, Nubuwah, Ma'ad, we have it written there. So that's what they specialize in, right? So they tell you what are the doctrinal beliefs that a Muslim should have, right? What are the beliefs that a Muslim should carry, right? So those are theologians, at least within the Islamic view, right? And then jurists. What are jurists?
They derive laws, basically Islamic laws.
Jurists are people who derive Islamic laws. What do we call them in Arabic?
Mujtahid.
Mujtahids, we can call them fuqaha, right? Fuqaha, right. And then what about the mystics?
Urafa.
The urafa, right? And what do mystics talk about? What's their goal?
Spirituality, self-purification.
Yes, okay, very good. So those are the three different groups, right? So before we get into this, I want to make just one point that we had talked about last week, which is really important. Most of our religion is actually based on the what we call the dhahir, right? What does dhahir mean? Do you guys know? The word you guys have heard the word Zahir and batin. Have you heard those words before? What does zahir mean? Yeah. What is external, right? Yes, what you can see. Exactly. What is obvious, right? In front of you. That's what's zahir. So this religion is based a lot on what is zahir, right? So meaning that there it's a big when somebody tells you that, that they accept the shahada, right? That they say la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, you have to believe them. They tell you that we're a Muslim, you have to believe them, right? You cannot say, oh well, in your heart of hearts, I don't think you're really a Muslim, right? You can't do that. You have no right, right? You have no right to. What was that?
Example of one of Prophet Sahabas, I think, he was in a war, and he was about to smite the guy, but then he recited the Shahada, and he was like, I don't
You're
believe
just
that you're
doing this to save yourself, right? Yeah,
And he kills him.
right. And then what did the Prophet do?
The Prophet said, I don't associate myself with the actions that you commit.
Right. Yes.
Because we don't know if in his heart he actually accepted
He actually accepted Islam. If he had even an ounce of sincerity in him, and Allah accepted that from him, who are you to question it, right? We have to go by the law. So that's why what is takfir? Do you guys know what the word takfir means? Right. When you accuse someone else of being a kafir, that's a big problem, right? Because unless you have definitive, strong evidence, right, that you've seen them coming out of the religion, you cannot accuse someone of being a disbeliever, right? Of excommunicating them from the religion, right? That's not our jurisdiction. We have to go by the law. So if somebody is professing Islam with their tongue, right, and they're implementing Islam with their actions, right, you can't say, oh well, your heart is not really accepting Islam. You really don't have anything to do with this religion, right? You have no right to do that, right?
So I have a question. So what if their actions aren't matching?
Yes, so that's a very good question, right? And so that comes into a type of kufr, right? Remember, because we said you have to believe with your heart, say with your tongue, and implement with your actions. So if you're not doing it, yes, if you're falling short with your actions, right? If you're not implementing the things that are mandatory for you to do in your religion, right? Then yes, it's a type of kufr, right? It's a type of disbelief. Now, the question though is, this is a very important distinction that we have to bear in mind. So, some people, let's say they don't pray, right? And that's a question that Brother Abdullah had brought up, right? That okay, but if you don't pray, then you are a kafir, right? Now, the reality of this situation is that it only becomes kufr if you believe that the Holy Prophet commanded you to pray that way, that you were supposed to pray that way, and it comes from Allah, and you still reject it. Then it becomes kufr, right? Because you're covering something, you're hiding something, even though you know it's the truth, right? But if you don't believe that the Prophet actually said that you have to pray, right? You don't believe that the Quran actually says you have to pray, right? Then it's not necessarily kufr, it's your own ignorance, right? Your own ignorance, but that person is not a kafir, right? So that's a really important distinction to make, right? So kufr is dependent upon you knowing something and still rejecting it, right? So when it comes to aqidah, right? So when we talk about theologians, right? So theologians they're concerned about salvation. What beliefs will guarantee your success in the hereafter? That's what theologians are interested in, right? So it's called, in English, they call it soteriology. Have you guys heard of that word before? Soteriology? It's like the study of salvation, right? So theologians, they're concerned about what beliefs are going to guarantee your salvation in the hereafter. So if you have a belief that contradicts this, right? Contradicts the beliefs that guarantee your salvation in the hereafter, then from a theologian standpoint, you're a kafir, right? So, so this is the way the theologians look at it, right? Now, the second group that we talked about was the jurists, right? So, what are the jurists? What are the jurists most interested in? Jurists are interested in what? What are they trying to do? Islamic law, right? They're lawyers, basically, right? They're doctors of law, right? So, the jurists, their interest is to tell you how do you interact with other people, right? In your society. So when a jurist says someone's a kafir, it specifically means that you cannot marry them, right? Because they're outside of your religious, basically, tradition, right? Specifically, a kafir is someone it's not allowed for you to marry them if they're a kafir. So we don't consider the Christians, the Jews as kafirs, right? So this is another important thing, that a lot of people just use the word kafir very willy-nilly, right? But kafir is not used in this sense, right? Kafir is someone who, from a law standpoint, right, specifically from the level of the jurist, they say you're not allowed to marry such a person, right? Yes, someone who rejects revelation, specifically with jurists, when they talk about this, they're specifically referring to individuals who are, for instance, polytheists, right? That's one differentiation of someone who is at that level where you cannot actually marry them. You cannot actually have, basically, even some scholars say that they are uh, ritually unclean. You can't really touch them uh, unless with wet hands, because that transfers najasa. They're spiritually impure, right? So jurists are interested in these types of questions, right? So when a jurist says this person is a kafir, that's the meaning here, right? So okay, and then what about the mystics? What do we mean with the mystics? So the mystics, you said, are interested in what? Tazkiyatun nafs, right? So self-purification, right? So this is where kufr becomes something. I think the whole discussion here was esoteric kufr, right? So esoteric, what does esoteric mean? The word esoteric.
An idea just like confined within a group of people.
Esoteric is best translated. Remember we said zahir, the word zahir. So what's the opposite of zahir? Batin, right? So esoteric is best translated as batin in Arabic, right? So it means what's inside, right? So what a mystic is talking about, uh, basically kufr, they're talking about not necessarily someone who's externally a kafir, but you actually having kufr within you, right? Within ourselves. And we have to do tazkiyatun nafs to try to get rid of that within ourselves, right? Because even, for instance, a human being, they're certain, even though they might not be a kafir, but they might do actions that are like kufr, right? For instance, rejecting Allah's blessings, right? Or misusing Allah's blessings, right? Or for instance, uh, speaking ill of someone who has helped you, right? That's a type of kufr, right? It's a type of uh, ingratitude, right? So uh, basically, when the mystics talk about kufr, they're talking about this lens, right? How do you purify yourself from aspects of disbelief within yourself, right? So you notice how the same word has a lot of different gradations in meaning depending on which group is using the term, right? So that's what's so important to understand. And this is a big problem within Islam because people will say, "Oh, you're a kafir." But then question is, okay, well, what do you mean by that, right? It's a very loaded term, right? You have to explore, okay, well, what does this specific term mean? How is this person using it? A lot of people don't understand these subtleties and these nuances in the term, right? So the other thing that's important to remember is that some people, right, they're in this world, right? You treat them as Muslims, right? You treat them as, from a law standpoint, you can say that they are Muslims and we accept them as Muslims, but you don't know in the hereafter how Allah will treat them, right? Because we don't know their batin, right? That is left to Allah. So some people, they come to this point where they say, oh, this individual, they are they're really, they look very nice on the surface, but inside they're a kafir, right? That's not, like we said, it's outside of our jurisdiction to say that, right? So okay, and then one other thing that I want to talk about today is the way that the word kufr is used in a relative sense, right? So do you guys think the word kufr can be a good thing after all this discussion that we had?
Yeah, I feel like because kufr, you said means hiding or covering something.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, I would guess like hiding something that people can see about you, and then have a bad image about you.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
hiding like for
Other
your brothers,
people's-
like covering up their mistakes.
Other people's sins.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like covering those
Just
up.
on a literal.
Okay, yeah,
You're not supposed to talk about other people's
Yeah.
sins.
okay. So hiding basically other people's mistakes or sins, right? Okay, that's very good. What else?
Or
Hiding
like
falsehood.
Uh-huh.
Rejecting falsehood.
I
Okay,
guess, like,
very good.
I
Yeah.
guess hiding like your past sins that can like that if revealed, like people will have a bad image about you. So like protecting your own future self,
Mm-hmm.
because
Okay.
you could be a change man,
Mm-hmm.
but like what you did in the past, trying to hide that.
Okay, very good. What else? Anything else?
That's all I
Okay. So I think yeah, those two things are very, very good. So let's start with the first concept of hiding your sins, right? Hiding your shortcomings, right? So there's a word in Arabic that's used for this. Do you guys know what it is? It's like a penalty that you pay if you do something. Let's say you miss a fast in the month of Ramadan. So it's called kafara, right? So that comes from the same word, kafara, right? Kafara, kafara. Kafara is what you do in order to cover up a mistake that you made, right? In order to kind of uh, basically as a penalty, like you have to now to cover up that mistake, you have to pay your kafara, right? So that's the term that we use, right? It's can you can think about it in the English words. I guess maybe it might be a little hard of a word. It's called penance. Do you guys know what? Have you heard the word penance before? Yeah. So penance is the best probably translation for kafara. It means what you do to basically make up, remediate for a mistake, right?
So, so it's like, but isn't that like making up for your mistake?
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's making up for your mistake, right? But kafara is making up for your own mistakes, right?
But
Um,
where's like well, I guess I'm looking at it literally, but like, where's like the hiding concept?
oh, because you're basically hiding that sin that you committed, right? Or that mistake that you made by doing another action that covers it over, basically, right? A good action that covers it over, right? So that's the way to think about that word, kafara. It comes from the same root, right? Now, the other thing that Allah mentions a lot is He says in the Quran, "Yukaffir ankum sayyatikum." Allah will do takfir, right, of your mistakes, your sayyi'at, your evil deeds, right? So this concept is mentioned a lot in the Quran that Allah basically will do takfir. Takfir means to cover over or to let go, basically to completely hide your deficiencies, right? So Allah does this a lot for the believers, right? He says, "Yukaffir ankum sayyatikum," right? He will hide the believers' deficiencies or their evil deeds, right? So this is a very important concept. The other thing that you guys mentioned, that Brother Hussein mentioned, was about falsehood, right? Doing kufr of falsehood. Can you guys explain that? What do you mean by that?
In the Quran, it says to reject the Taghut, like
Yeah.
reject the satanic system. So
Mhm.
I'm guessing like you hide falsehood by covering it up with truth. I'm guessing that's more interpretation.
Yes. Yeah. So this is a very there's a very important verse in the Quran called Ayatul Kursi. You guys have probably heard. There's a part of it that says, I'll start it. You probably know the verse. La ikraha fid din. Okay. Then what does it say?
فَمَن يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ
Yes. So فَمَن يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ. You see how it's saying whoever disbelieves in the Taghut, right? Whoever basically covers or hides the Taghut and puts their trust, puts their confidence in Allah, right? So it's showing you that basically kufr is a sense, like we said, remember kufr is a sense of stripping yourself of security, stripping yourself of any type of reliance, right? So this is what the word means in this sense, in this specific verse, right? So taking yourself away from any type of taghut, stripping them of any type of authority, saying that these guys are not my awliya, they're not my guardians, right? My only guardian is Allah. My only source of reliance is Allah, right? So that's another very important thing. And we see this actually, there's another third meaning which we didn't talk about, which is called kufrul bara'a. Have you guys heard that before? Kufrul bara'a?
Like disassociation is bara'ah.
Yes, yes. So it's the kufr of disassociation, right? So, for instance, Prophet Ibrahim in the Quran is a very famous verse. He says to the idol worshippers, right? He says, "Kafarna bikum, wabada baynana wa baynakum al-adawatu wal-baghdha." He says that I've disassociated myself from you, right? I have done kufr of you, right? So he's basically stripping himself away from those people. He's saying, I have nothing to do with you guys, right? So that's another meaning of kufr, right? That's a positive meaning. So we talked about three different positive meanings of the word kufr. Kafara, right? Second meaning was kufr of taghut, right? In the sense of stripping yourself of any type of authority, stripping them of any type of authority, saying that they have no authority, they have no power, they have no reliance whatsoever. And the third type is to disassociate yourself, right, from those who disbelieve, from those who are idol worshippers or polytheists, right? So see how the word has so many nuances about it, right? The same word, kufr, people are like, oh, you're a kafir, but they don't understand all the subtleties with the word, right? So this is how I think it's a very useful discussion to have, and um, we can definitely. There's even more we can discuss, but I think I want to open it up to see if you guys have questions about this.
I had a question about, so like the second kufr you talked about, the good one. Can you
Yeah.
give an example? Because I kind of like not this is like stripping it like of its power. What
Yeah.
does it mean?
So kufr bit taghut, right? So taghut, what does the word taghut mean? Do you guys know?
The satanic system with any, yeah, like any system that rejects God, basically.
Yes, right.
Governing body, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so that's usually how the word is translated. But what does the word uh, taghut come from? What word does it come from?
Darkness.
So it comes from the word طغيان, right? What does طغيان mean? طغيان means rebellion or transgression, right? Someone who is a taghi. A taghi is someone who basically uh, violates every type of law, violates every type of principle, right? That person is called a taghi, right? So taghut is basically a force that violates every type of sanctity. It violates every type of thing that Allah has made sacred, right? Allah has given sacredness to various things. Taghut is that which violates all of that. It violates every type of principle. It violates every type of law, right? That's what Taghut is, right? So, so this is the original meaning of Taghut. Then people say, okay, well, who is the best, what we say, misdaq? Who is the best instantiation of this? Shaitan, right? Because Shaitan went against Allah's entire system, right? Full rebellion, right? So that's why then it's translated as satanic forces. But this is what the word taghut means, right? So taghut means every type of force, every type of power, every type of, we'll say, energy, authority that tries to violate all the rules, violate all the principles, right? That God has put in place, right? So when you do kufr of that, right? You when you do kufr of that, you're saying, I'm stripping you of every type of power or authority. You have no jurisdiction. You have no basically sovereignty over my decisions, right? I put my belief only in God, right? So basically, you're disacknowledging, right? You're cutting your acknowledgement of any other power or authority except God, right? So that's what kufr of taghut means.
So my question is, in the Quran, munafiqeen, the hypocrites, right? They're considered more dangerous than the kuffar. But you can't really takfir a munafiq because outwardly they're saying, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. So like, how does that work?
Yeah, so munafiq, right? Like we said, a hypocrite, he professes Islam with his tongue, right? He professes faith with his tongue, but he rejects it with his heart, right? So the thing is that these types of people, um, they're very much like you said in your talk. Why would you do that? Let me ask you this: why would you do that? Why would you reject the truth with your heart, but you accept it with your tongue? What would be the reason for that? Ulterior motives, right? So what specifically?
The materialistic
Materialistic worldview, right? So a hypocrite, he recognizes that by camouflaging and pretending that he's a believer, right, he can get certain material benefits, right? So uh, that's why he professes, to be a Muslim, even though he really isn't, right? So that's the materialistic worldview, right? That is even worse than someone who is basically rejecting the truth, right? And completely with their tongue, with their actions, because that person is clearly identifiable. You can see them in society. You can say this person is not on my path. They're not one. They're not part of my posse. They're not part of my group, right? Whereas A munafiq, there's no way to identify him because you have, remember we said we go by the zahir, we go by the apparent, right? So this group of people, they've taken advantage of that mechanism to try to camouflage themselves amongst the Muslims, and then they wreak havoc from within the Muslims, right? To create hardships and difficulties for believers from within their group, right? Why? Because their ulterior motive, okay, materialism, but also to sow discord, to sow, what we call fitna, right? Amongst the believers. This group of people, that's the reason why they're cursed, because it's not so much their disbelief. Your disbelief might hurt you, right, in the hereafter. But these people, instead of also hurting themselves, they're trying to hurt others. They're trying to hurt other believers, right? Create hardships for them, right? So
Kind of like the mentality, like if I don't get it, nobody else can get it.
yes, right.
If you do catch a munafiq, like they would technically be a kafir, right?